let's start this thing. Welcome to the Dark Detour Season 2 Creator Chat. We have Allison Norrington. Say hello.
Hi.
You are. And Nick Tiers.
Hello.
And Jenny is coming back. Her computer froze.
She's in limbo.
She has issues with Google Hangouts. So Jojo has the first question. So let's. What was this your story? Your first choice, or did you have other potential story plots in mind? Allison, you could probably take that one.
I can take that, and it was our first choice simply because we had toyed with the idea of doing something around Valentine's Day, first of all. So we kind of thought about doing it maybe twice a year. Then we realised we were both absolutely deluded to think of that idea. So the story was kind of mapped quite early, although not in much detail. And as time evolved, we kind of got used to the story and began to like the characters and just decided that we'd stick with that one that we'd begun so much earlier in the year. So we just we evolved what we'd begun with, I suppose.
So yeah, that was kind of the only story that we went with. So it's 3 a.m. Where are you, Georgette? Oh, you're in like Singapore or something like that, aren't you? It's weird how we can't chat with you. We can only. Can I do that? Can I say, oh, this is weird. It's different than last year. I remember like a chat room or something last year.
Yeah, right.
Yes, the challenge with any of these things that is, supposedly happening in real time is to come up with times that things happen that, your audience can be awake for. And, with alternate reality games and stuff, that's kind of always a challenge. I know I have there's one window where the bulk of the nighttime is over the Pacific Ocean. It's like early morning here. Wait, is that right? Yeah, early morning in the West Coast and late at night in like Japan. And there's like this 2-hour window where most of the world is awake that we've used before. Dean O'Donnell has a great question. Could we have saved Jack if we had sent David directly to Five Witches Campground? No, you could not. First off, Jack wasn't at Five Witches Campground. Not that that was never part of it. Hang on a second. I'll try and get Jenny back on here. Answer that. Go ahead, Allison. Answer the rest of that for me.
Five Witches Campground was actually a jewel in the crown a little bit, wasn't it? Because we literally...
Yeah, it was something we actually just passed on the way to Griffinstone on the moor.
We were so excited, we only had a couple of days there, and as we were driving around Dartmoor, and there was no signal so many times, and we drove down this tiny little dirt track of a road, and there was literally that sign at the side of the road, and we were like, oh my god, no, and we backed up the car and took some photographs of that sign, and we were just so excited because we didn't even need to make that part up, right?
No, it was some spice to the story, right?
And I love stuff like that because there was a few things. I mean, the tree even. We hadn't factored the tree in until we got into the village and started walking around and saw that amazing tree.
Yeah.
There was quite a few things like that.
Yeah, the tree. Yeah, we did. The tree wasn't in the story at all until we got to the location and saw this amazing tree and said, "Oh, we gotta make that part of the story." So, but the bigger question is, could you have saved Jack? Really, there was nothing. We're kind of philosophically, at least I am. I can only speak for myself. I'm not a fan of choose your own endings because I think how can you be surprised by an ending if you choose it? I don't know. The saying that if Hamlet was a choose your own ending, it wouldn't be a very good play. Jenny, are you back? Can we hear you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, yay! All right, Jenny Powell, ladies and gentlemen. All right, next question here. Jojo, why did you try Periscope? Were you happy with the results? Periscope was an idea we had a long time ago, actually, and that was kind of we always wanted to have a finale with Periscope, and we had planned, even though the ending of the story took various guises, we had always planned for kind of the finale for everything to lead to a live streaming of video, whether it was Periscope or a Google Chat. Periscope seemed to make the most sense because it's just so easy. But the problem we discovered with Periscope was the night. We had a lot of technical problems that last day, and I think we overcame a lot of them. And one of the technical problems we ran into was Periscope doesn't let you turn the light on the camera for some God knows reason. And we kept trying to bring in extra light for that last scene. But then at the end of the day, I mean, it was an effective scene anyway because it was just kind of weird and Blair Witchy and a lot of shadowy stuff. And Rich, our actor playing David, did such a good job just kind of screaming. That was, I mean, and plus it was live. There was nothing we could do about it anyway. So when you do something live, we had just like we did a run through, and we couldn't do like a run through of the live thing. But then when it came time to do it, it was a little too dark. We waited a little too late in the day. We wanted to have it just like right at twilight so we could make it look dark. So that was one of the things I think where we made lemonade out of lemons a little bit because the shot didn't end up exactly like we wanted to. But I think it was still good. So in the future, bring a flashlight. Well, damn, we even had a flashlight, but I couldn't get Jenny's attention to bring the flashlight. Okay, let's see. Next question. People can plus these questions.
Yeah, Taryn's just put a message on the Facebook page saying, are things different this year? How do I ask questions? So I don't quite know how that works.
I don't know where they come up. There
should ask all these people that are asking questions. They should.
Yeah,
surely
I
know.
think on the left there's a Q&A button that you can tap. I think.
Okay,
and
I'll put a message.
I only worked at Google for a year, so I don't know. Angelique asked a question. Let's go to her question. So, do you think you'd create a story at some point where we can affect the ending instead of a set outcome?
We were all just looking like that one.
Yeah.
Allison, why don't you take the story?
Well, I think that what you said, Steve, is kind of, I don't know. I think with these ideas, even I always say like with the Mario game, right? You feel like that you're going in 5 or 6 different routes, but you always end up at the same point. And I think as a storyteller, then it's nice to have a set ending. But I do understand as a player, there's more agency if you feel you are actually really saving the cat rather than just like pretending that you're going to save the cat and it's never going to be saved. So I think it's a really interesting question. And I think it's something perhaps we should consider at some point, because having done this twice now, and our hapless main character every time ends up doomed, maybe that's something we should consider. I don't know. It's an interesting point.
From a storytelling perspective, though, I think that I understand what you're saying from a player perspective, wanting to have some effect on the story, but in terms of how the story ends, like Steve was saying in Choose Your Own Adventure novels, usually when people go through that, they have the same response, which is, oh, I chose the wrong ending, I didn't do it right, or there's generally a feeling of dissatisfaction with the ending that was chosen, and I feel like focusing on this A or B state, this binary state of the ending, puts too much importance on whatever the final movement of it is, and I think that leaving room for the player to put themselves into the story in different ways, not necessarily the conclusion of the story, but that's equally an important aspect of populating out the world by letting the players in. And I think that sometimes we focus a little bit too much on what that ending necessarily is.
Jenny, want to add anything to that? You've come across this at times, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think I agree with everything that's been said so far, and a huge difference between what we're doing and a Choose Your Own Adventure novel is that with a Choose Your Own Adventure novel, you do have the luxury of, if you don't like your choice, you can go back and try another one.
Yeah.
So
I think that's
key
because
these are the choices you made. We're gonna have to stick to them no matter what.
Yeah, I think that's key. I mean, when you're playing a video game and there's alternate endings, I mean, when you get to the end, what do? The first thing you do is you go back and you want to see the ending that you missed.
Hmm.
You want to see both endings. And with, I think with this in real time, there's ways, I think, to give the audience agency
Yeah.
and let them, because you know what they're going to do. I mean, you kind of think you know what they're going to do, and even though you know what's going to happen, they don't know what's going to happen. But you can still create things that make it feel like the audience touched the story to make whatever happened happen.
Well, there
Right?
was a big example of that when it was when Steve, you came over to my place and we were sitting here and we realized that like there was a chunk of time that needed to be some kind of had to be filled with something, or we had to give the audience something, and we had been noticing over time that people were really focusing on the candlelight
Mm.
and candlelight as a protective type of thing. And that's when we realized, oh, we could make the candles sort of similar to what you did with the sugar skulls last year, which is
Something for people to do.
something for people to do that feels like, and we honestly wanted that to be like, and we were all very touched by it, was seeing people posting pictures of candles to Jack and saying, hey, hang in there, help is coming, even though we knew it was not going to end so well. But still, it was a very touching moment in the game where at least I did, I kind of took a step back and I went, wow, look at all these people that care about this person.
Yeah.
And in
So-
that way, the player action defined sort of the theme that you can walk away with. Even though the ending was fixed, how the players interacted with that and the actual experience of playing the game, it became theirs, and and walking away from it, that's one of the most memorable and I think satisfying aspects of the whole thing. Was them responding and then making it about the thing that they were interested in.
Yeah, and I love the whole, and that, hashtag, what was it? Find Jack Now.
Jack Now.
All the stuff. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that, I mean, we kind of set up for the audience to do, and they jumped all over it. And it was, I mean, it was great. And even though the final outcome, but, getting there, it felt like a real journey. At least that was our goal. And so, I mean, it's problematic. I mean, if there's alternate endings and half of you want to do one thing and half of you want to do another, and then it's ultimately unsatisfying for a lot of the audience. I think. So anyway, that's my philosophy. I mean, you're very rarely going to see a true choose your own ending. From me, because I don't think it's as strong as a story crafted by writers that are awesome.
And in a general storytelling sense, if you have these alternate endings, that almost implies, for example, in this example, living or dying, that implies that both of those are equally valid options for the story. When a well-told story has an inevitable ending that is also surprising, but one is clearly what the story needs to be for its ending, and I think that's what it gets down to, is a well-told story will have one proper ending.
Yeah, nice. Good question. Moving on.
I just want to add to that is if we found that the players were taking it a certain way, that they got what they wanted, the fact would be that every action has a consequence, and it still wouldn't be the ending that they really think they're getting, right? So it would be some kind of mutation of what they would expect it to.
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about interactive story and interactive this, and everybody thinks that, oh, well, you can shape the story, but I just don't know many crowd-sourced storylines that they all just end up kind of being like mashed potatoes, right?
Yeah.
Right, and I think that this gets back to a debate, Steve, that we often had in the room on Ancient Societies, which was the difference between the story and the plot. And I think that while the plot dictates that Jack dies, the story, or how the story is experienced, is a culmination of a lot more elements than just the plot. And so this story, while the plot was fixed, the way it was told, the way it was expressed, the way it was experienced was very open to the interactions of the players.
Yeah, nice. Next question. For you, what was the best moment or moments of interaction with your experienced players. I think for me, there were a couple. I mean, the candles was always very touching, and just to see, the private messages that go into Jack, and people take it very, very seriously and feel really bad, and we feel bad. We felt bad as we're writing this, going, oh, what we're doing to Jack, this is terrible. I mean, you come to love the players, and I think that to me is the best moment when you realize that the audience is really bought in, and they really feel like, they really care about the people that are just words and pictures on a screen.
Jack and David were going to get a lot of work out of this.
Oh yeah, a lot of wedding photography work. Yeah, sorry.
In case anyone doesn't know, I was running the email accounts. So a lot of those conversations I was having, setting up people's wedding photos, that was me. And I was like, hey, if this was real, we could make a nice chunk of change off this.
I think because I was the voice of Jack, my favorite player interaction were the live phone calls.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I was at the Austin Film Festival at the time, and I had to find a room to do these calls in, and part of the programming was in a church, so I found an empty rehearsal room in this old church, and I'm hunched over on the phone going, help me, please, I'm basically crying in the corner making all these noises, and I just thought, if anyone walks by the hallway at this moment, they're gonna really scratch their heads as to what's going on in there. So that was my favorite bit.
I liked the candle part. I think that was really nice, and we'd kind of looked at ways we could recreate that kind of surge of help, like we did with the Sugar Skulls last year. And we scratched around for the ideas, and in a way, the players presented that to us quite organically, and that's always just such the best way, right? But I also liked the fact that the way people were really trying to help David, like really trying to help David. I thought that was magic.
Yeah, David came a lot more alive at the end than we anticipated him coming. While we're on the subject of those phone calls, there's a question here about the phone calls. And so we might as well get this out of the way.
Yeah.
DD Newbie here, this is Michael Cole. Sounds like some players experience phone calls and or texts from the characters. I didn't, so I'm curious, how does that feature get triggered by a player so they can receive those kinds of more advanced interactions from the game? That's an awesome question. And there's what was designed to happen, and then there was what actually happened, which is a little different. In a nutshell, well, there were two levels of this because this was an Indiegogo campaign. There was a perk that people could buy that got them a live phone call from a character, and 2 or 3 people bought that perk, and they got the privilege of having Nick call them, and we've got the recordings of those calls, don't we?
Yeah,
Nick?
they're in the Storify.
They're on the Storify? Okay.
Yeah.
And so that was that part. The text messages were basically, if anybody texted a character, they would most likely have gotten a text back. So all the people that when Jack finally got his phone back and he got a little bit of signal, we were able to finally reply to people who had been texting him throughout the story. And then the other thing that didn't happen, and we'll just be transparent about this, is that we had captured everybody's phone number that called either Jack or the Rugglestone, the Traveler's Arms, and we had a recorded version of Jack prepared to go out on Halloween. That was him trying to get a hold of somebody from the moors where he was stuck. As he got a little bit of signal, he was going to try and call whoever he could call, and that recording was. If you take the action of calling a phone number, at least in our stuff, you never know if that phone number is going to be captured, and then we're going to call back at some point. And that was the plan. The time came and went, and there was some technical issues on the back end, and we lost our window of opportunity to do that, and the call never happened, which makes me incredibly sad. So what we did instead, we upped those text messages at the time. We were all ready. We were waiting for the phone call. It never happened. So we jumped on those text messages. Anybody else have anything to add to that? The challenge with those interactions is it's really fun for the one person that gets the call. So, but we try to be as inclusive as we can, and that's one of the inclusive kind of broadcast phone call things that those who know me know I always love doing. And it's just I was weeping in the corner when I realized it wasn't going to happen. So,
yeah,
all right.
It's true. I was there.
It is. She had to come. I was holding Jack's hand, his severed hand. Okay, let's see. Next question here. This is from Dean O'Donnell. Were you surprised by the level of vitriol being posted on Freya's wall? Even after we found out she was under a spell, there were a lot of players who wanted her dead. I'll let you guys answer that.
Well, so
she killed Jack.
I suppose. Go on, you go, Jenny.
I'm not particularly surprised. I mean, it's kind of human nature when you get that attached to a person. And I think having played it last year, and I remember, how everything ended, and I remember thinking that when we lost Talbot, it was like, okay, whose fault is this? Like, I want to blame someone. And I think what was different this year is that players had that person that they could blame. Like with Talbot, it was like there wasn't really anyone we could blame because in reality, he died of an accident, which, none of us had control over. But with this, it was like, I think it was a sense of like, I'm really hurting right now, and someone took someone away that I care about. Whose fault is it? And they had someone they could blame. And again, with the nature of it being online, they could kind of let that fly without really...
It was pretty venomous.
Needing to worry too much about repercussions, because in the end, it's, a fictional character. But, it's a stage of grief. They were going through anger, and that was how some of them decided to position it. And so I'm not that surprised.
Allison?
I pretty much echo what Jenny said. I wasn't surprised. Initially I was, and I felt kind of bad because as a character that wasn't who Freya was. She was influenced by this curse. But then I kind of liked it. I'm a bit of a weirdo maybe, but I kind of liked it because it was kind of a stand for justice in a way. That meant that they loved the guy, like the character, or they just felt this huge injustice that despite the fact that she was under this curse, that she did this thing. I'm interested to know back whether that feeling of hate for her changed, not when you guys realized that she was under the curse, but then when she went and actually finished herself off as well because she couldn't live with herself, right? Did that redeem her character in any way? I don't know. I mean, it was kind of, once you thought it had ended, then it went a little bit further, then it went a bit further until basically both of them were dead. Was it like a Romeo and Juliet kind of tragedy in the end that echoed what had happened to all of those couples with the tree? So I'd be interested to get feedback on that from the players.
Yeah, and what we tried to do is we tried to kind of walk this fine line with Freya between, we didn't want to tip too early that she was kind of under the influence of something. I mean, we wanted her to be likable, and we wanted to, even though it was so fast, we were trying to figure out ways to misdirect attention away from her and make it look like she was trying to protect Jack from the weird townsfolk who we were leading everybody to believe were going to sacrifice Jack by tying him to the tree or whatever. I don't know how successfully we pulled that off, but part of it too was, I think, that we wanted her to be likable so that feeling of betrayal was really strong. So maybe we did, because it felt like it was a really strong reaction. And we realized too, we did adjust we had the note that they found first from Freya, and we realized that note wasn't contrite enough in a way, and we decided to do that final Facebook post, right? or we were going to do that all along, but we adjusted the writing a little bit to make her a little bit more. She was undone by what she did, and we wanted to make that clear. And then she jumped off the cliff. So poor Freya. Here's a question. Here's a technical question. So Hugo asks, last year for Talbot, you got a lot of followers by using the logic of musicians like attention and followers, and this created a snowball of followers. Well, was this the case for Jack on Twitter as well? If not, how did she get over 10,000 followers? I paid $10. I paid $5 for 10,000 followers. And but here's and I did that just to kind of fill it up and just to see what would happen. We tried to do the same thing with Facebook, and if you didn't notice too, we had a little problems with Jack's Facebook, and we still don't know why, but it somehow got flagged as for some reason for security purposes, and we went to log into Jack's Facebook the morning of. This was after we had seeded Jack's, for a month's worth of content, and all of a sudden we couldn't access it because Facebook was coming back to us and saying, "Hey, listen, for security reasons, would you mind sending us a photo of a picture ID and some other form of like a utility bill so we can make sure it's really you logging into this?" And Allison was so funny. She's like, "Well, just Photoshop a driver's license. How hard can that be?" But
my criminal tendencies.
Yes. So we were scrambling that first Monday. This was the day before the public launch, to kind of get Jack going again. That's why Jack didn't have a Facebook page the first day, because it was gone. We were trying to recover it and couldn't recover it. And I think this is lesson learned for those of you out here doing this. I don't know if it was, I had done a thing where I was buying 100 friends. I was just playing around trying to see how this worked, and I don't know if the friends that I friended being fake kind of triggered it, or more likely, I think it was the fact that we were having one account that was being simultaneously logged in by different people in different countries. So I think
Me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, between Jenny and it was different IPs all logging in the same address. So that might have been the flag. So note to future producers of this, if you're going to do that, yeah, that might be one of the flags for Facebook. So we had to scramble. We had no content for Jack, no back content, other than his Instagram, which was luckily all still there. But that was kind of sad. It was kind of, that's what you get for depending on another platform for your thing. Anyway, so Jack had 10,000 followers because I bought them.
and this might be a shock to some people, but there are a lot of people on Twitter who buy their followers. I know, shocking revelation here.
You can buy 100,000 followers for $19.95.
And so you always know to look when you're following someone. Don't look at the number of followers they have. Look at the amount of engagement they have on each of the individual tweets. But guess what? You can buy that too. So I don't know what the answer is here.
It's all just a game.
It's all a game.
That's all just a game. Okay, next question from Jez Lucena. At some point I read the whole source code of the Tavern's website, but I couldn't really find anything besides source code. Were there puzzles and rabbit holes we didn't see or solve? I don't think they missed anything. Nick, do you?
No, not at all. And I think it's funny because as a player myself in the past, I had that same question every time: was there stuff we didn't find? And I think when you have a community as active as this one, everything is always found.
I think, if anything, stuff was found really quickly. And,
oh yes.
Oh yeah.
And even I loved the one overt puzzle that we did with the runes. It was fun to just watch people jump into action. People that knew how to, the community people that knew, okay, I'll take the first line or I'll take the last line and move backwards, and we'll meet in the middle, and it was solved really, really quickly. And as we all know, designing puzzles for the hive mind is always a challenge, because you can think it's going to be easy and it takes a day, or it never gets solved, and you can think it's going to be hard and they solve it in 3 minutes. So it really depends on who's out there and who has the knowledge of what it is. But I don't think there was anything. We didn't put anything, because it wouldn't make sense to have puzzles in the source code of that website. We tried to keep things as organic as possible. We didn't have a lot of ghosts and stuff this time, so we couldn't blame things on just things being haunted. So we kind of just tried to keep it very grounded this time. The one thing, if you check the source code, I will say that I worked very hard on the source code for that the Legends of Britain site to make it look like it was done in
It's so good.
1996. And if you look, it even was like, generated by, Microsoft Front Page or whatever it was called. And so that was kind of fun. And the
There's only
HTML
one
was
thing.
off. Huh?
Sorry. There was
Go
only one thing that I thought people might have picked up on quicker, is that if you look on Wikipedia of Freya, she's the Nordic goddess of love, beauty, sexuality, war, and death.
I think people
And
did
the story
there were
of
many,
Freya,
yeah. Go
but
ahead.
not as early as that started to come out a little bit later, but I was kind of a bit worried about that was too obvious. But I was glad they didn't, I've got to say. But it was all there in the name, really.
Yeah, it's
Which
true.
like crazy.
And again, this thing wasn't an ARG to me. I mean, it wasn't something with a lot of puzzles and stuff. I mean, we wanted to just have it be fun and very, very accessible. And I think it was. I think our audience was about twice as much as it was last year. A lot of people came in the end. I saw a lot of new names I didn't recognize. And so, that's the balancing act with stuff. I mean, you want stuff there for people to dig, but at the same time, you don't want it so complicated that people don't feel like they can, do it. So you try and make it easy for those that want just a light touch, and put enough there to just kind of make it fun to just kind of dig, because you never know when you're going to find stuff. And we can thank Nick Tierce for that great Lufatreo video, which I loved. I loved it. Okay, here we go. Pixie. Many of us had issues this year following along because of Facebook feed issues, features. So unless we went to each character's page every few minutes. Did you have issues with anything on social media platforms? Well, we already mentioned, the Facebook thing.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of Facebook, and after doing this last year the same and doing it this year, I'm even less of a fan of Facebook. I really hate Facebook. It's just atrocious. It's despicable.
I was about to say, that was the understatement of the century. Steve Peters is not a fan of Facebook.
Yeah.
It's tough because we're trying to tell a story, and Facebook, when the posts get going, it doesn't, for most people, it doesn't show posts chronologically. We suggest that you put notifications for just Jack or the character, but it's that damn Facebook algorithm. You just never know. You could see an entirely a bunch of stuff that you miss. So yeah, it is a challenge, and that we would try and be redundant when we could in posting to Facebook, and make it so that there was never like a critical one post that if you missed you would totally be in the dark. But that's why we tried to we were cross-posting to Twitter. We were cross-posting. I didn't try cross-posting to Google Plus. I just can't bring myself. Sorry guys, I just am not. Google Plus. It's all Felicia Day and Ingress players on Google Plus. And it didn't make sense for the characters to have Google Plus in our heads. But it's an ongoing challenge. We talked about this before. How Twitter's good because it's not filtered, but it goes by really fast. So that was a big.
I liked that we got to use Instagram more.
Yeah, and Instagram is.
With Jack being a photographer, it made perfect sense to use Instagram more, and I really enjoyed that because I liked the way he's told stories through his pictures.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I would consider telling a story just on Instagram sometime.
Yeah.
Especially now that you can do video too.
Yeah, because it's got the videos, and who knows? Yeah, maybe next year they'll just have an Instagram account. Who knows?
Every year Facebook becomes less and less the place to tell a story like this.
Yeah.
Oh, Facebook. Delete poor Jack. We had worked so hard on all those Jack posts, and nobody.
It was a horrible, horrible moment when we were like, "Where did it go?" Oh,
and we had great interaction between Jack and David, really kind of setting up the character. The New York Mets and the Yankees were a bigger part of it because it was during the playoffs, and there was just a lot of fun stuff there that's just gone. Thanks, Facebook. Thank you very much. Jojo, there was an earlier mention of Valentine's Day. Is there potential, can we hope, for something maybe even smaller, but something for other times of the year, holidays?
I think maybe that's your Instagram story, Steve, that you just talked about. Maybe.
You never know.
Instagram love story. Sorry. I'm already thinking about it.
That's how it started, wasn't it? And we thought like we'd do something for Valentine's. What we found though, I mean, when we finished with last year's story, or like we were quite exhausted after that last year, right? So it took us a few weeks to like get our heads together. Then we were trying to get all of our info together as to what went wrong and what went right, and we had the idea for Valentine's Day, but there wasn't enough lead time really for us to get it off the ground. So, you know, I think from October to February, it's not enough of a window for us to make that work necessarily. In terms of other holidays, I don't know. I'd love to do that, but you know, it's how organised we are, really, isn't it, Steve? To be honest.
Yeah, and to me, I just love using this for telling a horror story in this. I mean, Dark Detour is all about horror stories, but you never know. You don't know. Somebody could be really interested. I turn Dark Detour into something.
Well, it would have to be a whole new thing. It couldn't be Dark Detour. If we did something for Valentine's or Easter or whatever, it'd be a whole new brand.
Yeah.
I can do a Dark Detour Easter. I'm down for it.
Jojo, my next project will be a Columbus Day alternate reality game. And it will be told exclusively. It will be told exclusively through PhotoBucket. Get ready for that, Columbus Day 2016.
Flag Day.
Yeah.
Flag Day for me.
My sister.
All right, next question from Jez as well. Were the ring curse and the Lufa Trail curse separate things? Was the ring a way for the Lufa Trail to manifest this time around? Was any of the paranormal stuff not true? I'll let Allison take it. She's smiling.
I knew you were going to give that one to me. They were completely separate things. The ring curse was very much part of the foundation of the story. And when we initially started to write the story, we were going to have a story that was told between Norway and New York, and the ring was going to come from Norway, and that was kind of a big tie-in with her being named Freya and all of that. As things evolved, and we decided we work quite well on the different time zones, so we're pretty much 24/7, especially when Steve wakes up at 4:45 in the morning. But we work quite well around the clock. And we decided to not make it be that. But so the ring curse was very embedded at the heart of the story, that she would find this ring. Then when we got to the village, what was the village really called that we went to? Widdicombe in the Moor. So the village we based Griffinstone around was called Widdicombe in the Moor, and we got there and we saw this tree. And even after we'd been there, we knew there was something about the tree, and we knew we needed something to make the people in the village kind of seem eerie, and to give another reason for Freya to want to keep Jack away from the villagers. So once she'd kind of captured him through the curse, we needed almost like a little bit of a misdirection. So we wanted people to feel that she was keeping him safe. So the love tree basically was a whole thing that we brought in a little bit later that was a cool misdirection.
It was entirely misdirection. And in my mind, the love tree was... It was, in my head, Thomas, the innkeeper, was the webmaster of Britain Legends, the Legends of Britain, and they were all just kind of making it up to help the tourism in the town. I don't know how the truth lies somewhere in the middle there, but for me it was like the Reverend was in on it. And everybody just like, it was a fun thing. Nobody ever took it seriously. But we wanted people to think, oh, wait, is this the real spooky thing? And are they really going to kill him? I mean, you can't have a twist at the end without lying to your audience a little bit at the beginning.
And making it be like the curse was every 99 years, right? So it was long enough that there was never another generation that had witnessed it, right? So it was a long enough amount of time that every generation that was growing through the village was never really sure. So those stories of those couples that was all kind of happened every 99 years were completely fabricated, but still with a little question mark, because like Steve said, the Reverend and the villagers, you know, is a little bit of a tourist trap, really. But yet they're not 100% sure, you know, because no one's lived long enough to know.
And it wasn't based. There's no actual legend that we were aware of about that.
No, we just completely made that up.
Made that up. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Pixie asked about the Indiegogo. Did it surprise you that the gamification did so well, or that certain levels sold better than others? Did Alon playfully pick on you for taking the Exploding Kittens plan? Alon's too busy. He didn't even know what we're doing, so it doesn't. I can steal Alon stuff all the time. I do. We steal each other's stuff. That's how we work. It was. We talked a little bit about this at Story Forward LA. How the gamification of it, for those that don't know, we changed the stretch goals a little bit to try and make it not about money but about awards. And on the one hand, I think it worked really well because it timed out actually. The last reward that was unlocked was like 4 to 6 hours before everything closed. But on the other hand, I mean, from a strictly Indiegogo fundraiser kind of standpoint. And we raised more money. We hit our internal target, but it didn't. To me, it didn't accomplish what I hoped. In that, these rewards were all about kind of extending the reach and getting new people involved. Post a thing on Instagram. Post a thing on Twitter and have the hashtag. And I just don't think we had critical mass. I don't think we had enough people doing it. And it was like, here, help us spread the word. The bottom line for those is help us spread the word about Dark Detour, and we'll unlock these stretch goals. I think that's the basis for it foundationally. It didn't quite work out that way to the extent. I'm glad. I'm happy it worked out. Absolutely. And you guys did an amazing job. But I think for me, the design of it was a little off in that. Needed to expand the reach a little bit. That was kind of the goal. But at the end of the day, we had twice as many players, audience members this year as last year. So we did something right. It's not exactly.
I mean, you spent a lot of time on that, Steve, and I was really grateful and impressed the way you strategized all of that. Like, you spent a lot of time, even like kind of creating all of the goals and the perks and everything that would happen, and how people would get like 100 followers, and then this would happen. You spent a lot of time on that, and I think you really had something there that we could have done a lot more with. I think one of the most difficult challenges with our one was that we didn't have it running for enough time to get that groundswell and to catch enough speed up on it. Yeah. I'd love to play with that idea a little bit more for subsequent projects, but I think the main problem for us with that was quite a short window. I think with Alon's Kickstarter, didn't he have it running for a little longer than we did?
Yeah, we were late out of the gate, and that was problematic all around. And I think, and two, a lot of our audience, a lot of our friends and typical audience from last year, the last week of the Indiegogo campaign was during Burning Man, so they were gone. Yes. So we had a lot of people that kind of missed out because they were at Burning Man. But it worked. I mean, it all worked out in the end, obviously. Okay, next question. Yakin, I can't pronounce your last name. Nahahi. Hi all, sorry if I butchered that name. I wanted to know if you added storytelling elements on the fly. For example, the Periscope video, was that pre-recorded or live feed? Periscope was very live. And yeah, if you missed early, it was very, very live. And I'll do the follow-up here. I mean, but we added, I think that was the only platform. I mean, we didn't add new platforms as we went. We had planned those out, but the Periscope was always, to us, it became very clear that the story was leading up to a live streaming thing on Periscope, and we wanted very much. I don't know if you've seen the guys on Chat Roulette who have done the first-person shooter.
Oh my, so good!
Amazing. And that was just a real big kick in the pants to me. I'm going, oh, it would be great to just have, ideally, you know, I mean, can you imagine, like, you've got this guy wandering around this, you know, spooky old house, and the audience is directing him where to go and what not to do and what to do. Maybe that's next time. But this time we wanted to have it really just be, yeah, he's to show kind of what he finds. And originally the story wasn't going to happen. Jack's End, I won't go into it, but Jack's End wasn't going to happen on the moors. It was going to happen somewhere else. And it would have lent itself to, you know, David wandering around kind of a maze of hallways and stuff like that, and needing the player's help. This was a little bit less. We worked that into the puzzle and the Instagram and putting it all together. That it kind of did the same thing. But the Periscope thing was live, and there's a follow-up question here relating to that. I'll go ahead, and it says, was the Periscope always intended to last as long as it did, or did you guys have actual signal problems? Were we supposed to have seen Jack's hand and hat on Periscope? And the sad answer to that is, well, it's not really sad, but we talked about that at the beginning, was that, yeah, you were supposed to see the hat and the hand because they were so awesome. Hold up that hand, Jenny. Show us that hand and say something so you get really big on the screen.
What? Oh, yeah, I got real big on the screen.
It's a really good, it's a really good looking hand. It's a shame.
Tattoo on the back we had to hide because we were like,
yeah.
that. But.
It's a shame that I mean, that's why we took the photo of it afterwards, because originally you were supposed to see light of the camera in the phone, which didn't work because of Periscope, so it didn't. So we kind of had to play a little bit on that, but we wanted to have that a little bit more, see a little bit more. We didn't have signal problems. We had a little bit at first, but the signal problems, it ended when it was supposed to end, which was when you saw the hand, which was there, but it was dark and you couldn't see it. So more realism, I guess. Sorry. Next time.
Now we know.
Hugo asks, for Season 2 you used Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Would you drop one of these platforms or use another platform for Season 3? What do you guys think? Instagram only?
Well, the thing is we don't know what's going to exist next year, you know?
Right.
Like, there could be some, like, Periscope wasn't around when we did it, when the first Dark Detour happened. So they're always coming up with these new crazy social media platforms, so who knows what we'll have access to next year, and I think that's part of the fun of it too.
And I think for the first one that we did, I mean, we were talking about using existing platforms in new ways, so we looked at using what was Foursquare and then moved over to Swarm, and we'd even spoken to Foursquare about, you know, kind of helping facilitate that story. And then when we were discussing this season, you know, Periscope was still really relatively new, so it was that idea of how could we kind of use it in an innovative, fun way. And exactly what you say, Jenny, we have no idea what's going to be around this time next year, but it's fun to try new platforms to tell stories in new ways, and there's always challenges, as you guys found out with that shoot of Periscope. But yeah, I mean, I think we always need to keep looking at what we can use in a new, fresh way, right?
And I think that there's no real sense in dropping any of the platforms because you want as many people to experience it as possible. So I think in an ideal sense, you cross-post as much as you can, and you have some exclusive content on some of the platforms, and you hope that people interact with it as much as they can. But, you know, as appealing as it would be to just tell the story on Instagram, that's a barrier for a lot of people who don't use Instagram.
Yep.
Next question. When working on projects like these, do you get as excited and anxious as we do when you're calling or texting us?
Yes!
We get pathetically excited, really. It's quite ridiculous. And as excited as we get, we're also really, really sad and upset when we know we're about to kill somebody. It feels really, really bad. So we are all quite pathetic, really, that we get really excited.
I was certainly excited to make the phone calls, but the only anxiety came from someone coming into the room and finding me doing it.
You know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you're voicing a character, there's not the anxiousness there. You're just more worried about, oh, am I going to say something wrong, or am I going to? Where are we in the story? And you want to make sure that you're not going to do something. But the live phone calls, I'm sure, would be. But you know, it's funny. People are like, "Oh, I wanted to call the phone number, but I was afraid somebody would answer." And you know, never know. You might have a phone number with an actual person on the other end.
That's the fun.
That's definitely in the cards. So it's fun. We get excited for sure. Hugo, let's see if we can split this. Anybody else here that hasn't? All right, Hugo. When doing a horror story, there are a lot of paths one can go to scare your audience. Random example, jump scare. Is there a list of things that you guys decided would be a no-go?
Oh.
Maybe gore.
Yeah.
Decided,
well, and I think the only reason we didn't do gore is that's something you have to really plan ahead for.
Need a little budget.
Yeah.
But tone-wise, I think Dark Detour. We're trying to make Dark Detour. It's more of it's like a Tales from the Crypt or Twilight Zone or it's a little bit more accessible. It's not like and we did consider a jump scare in that last video from David. At least I did. Nobody else wanted to do it, but I would have been happy to have put a jump scare at the end of that last David thank you video. But I think for me, it was mostly we didn't want to go to the really dark, intense places. We want it to be fun. We want you to be dreaming about it, but we don't want it to be like gross and ruin your week.
And a lot of times in those really like not stereotypical is not the right word, but the more gore-filled horror movies they're not about really attaching yourself too closely to the characters because most of them are just going to get slashed and hacked apart. And that's not really what we're trying to do. It is still about like connecting with characters and yeah. It's not like a slasher, like, oh, well, I better not get attached to this guy because he's going to go upstairs and get his head cut off.
I think that because you're getting attached to the characters, it's more character-driven. Just when David was going through Griffinstone that first night, people were kind of on the edge of their seats, it felt like it, because they didn't know what he was going to run into. And that was just words, Twitter, that was just tweets and posts on Facebook.
But there's also, we've discussed this before in the team, how to layer it, right? So, we've had to say to people like, we want to do this. Would you mind a call at this time of night? If you want to kind of opt out, then opt out. And when you've got something like this, like we've got a real good core team of like regular loyal players who know now what we're about and where it's going. But because we've got these characters out on social media, there were a lot of people that I found that were connecting who weren't connected to any of you guys as players.
Right.
So you knew they were coming in from like out of field in a way. And then you've got an experience that you've got a huge kind of massive people. You've got a massive people in that are playing together. How do you layer that so that you don't push the boundaries too far? And there's fun stuff. We've spoken this and last year about, people knocking on you guys' door, right, and leaving stuff at your door and like really freaky, crazy stuff on Halloween night. That I know we'd love to continue that conversation, but when you're telling a story as a broadcast voice like that on social media, there's an element of buy-in or opt-in that you need from people to take it to that next level.
And on that level, I think, we've touched on it a little bit, or I guess Dark Detour has touched on it a little bit the last 2 years, but I think it'd be really interesting to explore in future installments the idea that the passive observer will get a certain level of fright that would be appropriate for anybody, but the deeper you dig, the scarier it gets. And so you're almost giving consent by simply being curious and engaging with the content. I think that would be a way to layer so that the darker, scarier stuff is only unlocked to you if you're engaging with the top level stuff.
Okay, next question. This is from April Arlington. Really liked the video of the main legend, and it was interesting seeing the rest of the videos in that channel. I want to talk about that and how you feel about including more videos in these type of experiences. Yeah, I will first off say Nick did an awesome job with that video.
Thank you.
And that was fun putting Jim Stewartson, our first perk, in the game that way, which is kind of nice. We had our first, and it was 100 years ago. But video, we talked a lot about video in this, and we don't want Dark Detour to become like a video
web series
with extra stuff. And to me, video, I like there's something about telling stories through still photographs and text that's really interesting in that it leaves more open to the imagination. It leaves
Well,
more.
and it's more realistic. I don't know how many people, when they're like out and they're scared and they're in this intense experience, is like, oh, you know what? I better vlog this right now. Like,
right. At least for now, I mean, there's that tension that, you know, with somebody, I don't know how many times, and you know, they probably hated me, the writers, Jenny and Allison and Nick, you know, when they would write something, I would cut it to shreds, go, that's way too, nobody would post this, it's way too wordy. And we struggle with that with even photos. It's like, and we crossed the line a couple times, but that was after people bought in. But at the very beginning, we were very careful to try and make the social media post as authentic as possible, kind of in their substance and in their style. And I think that pays off. As far as video goes, we chose video very carefully when we would use it. Again, we only did it a couple times at the beginning and at the end. I think anything more than that, I know we all want to see it, but I like letting people imagine it a lot better.
And maybe we should, for posterity, in the description of this video that we're doing right now, put the link to the Story Forward episode where we talked about this in more detail.
Yeah,
because this was a pretty big part of that discussion.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's a Story Forward episode where all of us, except sadly Allison, who was in Vermont, had waffles at the time. Okay, let's see. Lucas Lentz asked, like last year, this year, did you have any plans for any dead drop opportunities? Allison, I don't think we did. It would have to be in the moors.
Yes, yeah, and I think that was something that made that not possible for this year. But I mean, I'd always like to be able to do that, but just location-wise, I think it made it difficult.
Yeah, and plus you got to always be really careful because dead drops are really great fun for those that are there, but you got to figure out a way to entertain the rest of the audience while people are going to get the dead drop. We did kind of a fake dead drop with Constance. We had her going out to the town.
Yeah.
Deliver some. The challenge with this is whenever you have a little story bit that needs to come from somebody that's not a main character, you know, information that they wouldn't be able to get. How do you do that? So that was one of those instances where we're going, gosh, if we just had somebody that could go into the town and report back, because David wouldn't do that, you know. So that was just one of the times that we kind of bent the fourth wall a little bit and had one of our players do a little role playing for us. I think it worked. It helped.
I think as we grow this too, we listen back a lot to the players and we watch a lot. And I mean, every night before the next day goes live, we're right back in there, like refining everything based on what's happened that day. And I think we're still getting to know our audience a little bit too, like in terms of how they're behaving and how deep they want to go. And I know for me, especially like the last couple of years, I'm getting to know you guys as players more and understanding how far we can push it and what kind of things you might like. So it's still a bit of a learning curve for me, at least.
Here's an interesting question. How do you decide to break the story down? Fellow players said not much was happening for the first 2 or 3 days, and they wandered away before the story really got going. Well, that's sad to hear.
I think we were a little bit hampered with that because of Jack's. There was a lot of stuff on Jack's Facebook. There was a lot of interaction between him and David. We'd really set it up in terms of Jack wanting to come to the UK and what they were doing with their business. And, you know, I mean, Freya's account was up and live, but of course as players, you guys only met Freya once she connected with Jack. So we do make a point of trying to really like preload a good, I'd say 10 days at least of content, because we know those first 2 or 3 days, it's like, okay, we're in, what the heck is this? So there's
an establishment shot, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a shame that happened, because the story, really, the ownership of the story kind of changed. It began as Jack's story, and then Jack met Freya, and like it became more of her in the mix, and then really the final act was David's story. So it kind of transitioned. Last year it was just our old friend Talbot Griffin.
Yeah.
It's a shame to see that, really, but maybe the Facebook thing was a problem.
I'd be interested to hear from you guys if you thought the story length was too long, too short, or just right. Post in the comments or something. The other thing I want to say about the story progress is, to us, the video, the Luca Trail video, was there. It functioned as what we hoped was going to be the hook into the story, the hook for the audience, where they would find that video, right on the first day. And it would be like, oh, okay, this is interesting. I mean, that was kind of our hope. I don't know how well it worked out like that, but I mean, yeah, we do realize that you need to have a hook to pull people in the story, and the hook has got to be something simple. And this case was, hey, there's this weird, creepy tree with this curse on it, and there's this guy heading to England. So there's going to be, the pistol above the mantelpiece that's going to be fired at some point. So that was our goal with that. I don't know how well we pulled that off.
And this is a conversation that would be good to continue with the players and with people responding, because I think a lot of people might come into something like this with an expectation that they're bringing from other types of storytelling, and so we're trying to figure out how much content at the beginning versus how it plays out. Pacing this type of thing is new because you don't want to risk putting too much out there and overwhelming people at the beginning who want to enjoy it casually, who don't want to feel like they have to experience 10 days in one at the very beginning. So I mean, we should keep getting responses from people on this subject, because we're all still figuring this out.
I mean, and we went live on the 26th or the 27th of October. So that's like 4 or 5 days of story that led us up to Halloween. So in our mind, that live period was like 4 or 5 days, although we'd been working and seeding it way beyond that.
Yeah.
So I'd like to know where that 2 or 3 day, those first 2 or 3 days were. Was that literally 27th, 28th, 29th of October? Because then we only had 2 days left before the Halloween kind of finale happened. So I'd be interested to know. As well, with horror stories, there's a pacing and that tension. You watch a horror movie and you're not straight in at the action. It's all of that kind of holding you on the edge of your seat. So I'd love to get some feedback on that in terms of how it played out over the days as a user, right?
Yep.
Quick question: did you have a ghost in the Hangouts chat? I don't think I wasn't in there. Were any of you guys? I don't think we had anybody in there watching.
No.
I'd like to know where that came from. Maybe someone had a creepy moment. We did have a link to, the group and the document and stuff like that. That was interesting. It would have been helpful for us to have a ghost in the chat. But hey, what are you gonna do?
That's the name of season 3 of Dark Detour. Ghost in the chat.
Ghost in the chat. I love it. I'm down.
Okay, and one more question here from April, what would you say was the driving platform? I live in Instagram a lot and wanted to engage there more, but I see most people were talking in Facebook. How do you manage that split with the Puppet Master crew? We did try and split stuff up. We had Jenny covering the emails. We had, Allison covering Freya pretty much. We lost Nick to Austin, so he couldn't do anything but voice act for us, which was the best part anyway. It did become, Instagram is a little tougher to interact back and forth because the comment section is just not as direct, and we went where the action was. There was a lot more action on Twitter this year, and a lot more action on Facebook. So there weren't a lot of comments there weren't a lot of people commenting on the Instagram that we saw. If we were Instagram only, that might be the case. Who knows? But again, you're trying to you got to go where people are, and it's interesting to see where critical mass is going to end up, what platform. And again, I think Facebook. I was happy to see Twitter kind of do more this year than last year, but it's still.
I feel like David was very Twitter heavy.
Yeah, that's true. I think it depended on the characters. So once we lost Jack, Instagram kind of went away to a certain extent, and you guys lost Jack before you realized you lost Jack. The question there, Rich asks, did Freya leave Jack in the bog that time he fell? And that's it. That's absolutely true.
Yep.
That was the moment where she started posting as Jack. So we kind of wanted that. Our goal with that was, we wanted to have that twist like at the end of, you know, Sixth Sense or something, where you see all these photos of these people in love, and all of a sudden you find out, you get new information, and you go back and look at the photos, and now they look entirely different in a new context that you didn't know existed. And so hopefully we were able to pull it off.
Well, we tried to drop clues in, and maybe we didn't have enough time to seed it properly, but the tone of Jack's posts changed. He'd calling his brother, hey bro, and hey man, and like David would go, bro, like really, and we were trying to make it that Freya was trying to be kind of hip and cool, right, and posting like Jack would, and she was kind of getting it wrong. So there were subtle kind of changes in the tone of his posts that we hoped might be a bit of a clue.
Here's an interesting from Hugo. Yeah, me again. I guess the possibility of someone catching the experience halfway and thinking it is real is always a risk here. Was there a plan in case someone called the cops, for example?
That would have been brilliant. I'd have loved it if that happened.
Yeah, no, I can't speak for everyone, but I would have popped the champagne and said, "This is the most magnificent exposure we could possibly hope for."
Me too.
I hate to say that, but it's kind of true. And at the same time, it's like, well, where are they going to send somebody? We're going to send them to Griffinstone in the Moor.
Right? We deliberately made a fictional village, right?
Yeah. So I mean, there are things that we in design, made sure to put in there to get in the way of that sort of thing. Not to say that it wouldn't happen. I mean, we hang out with people that, had the Hong Kong Stock Exchange shut down because in their game they posted that Bill Gates had been assassinated, and somebody sent that to somewhere and they thought it was real, and they get a call from, the Justice Department or something saying, what's up with this. We talk about responsibility a lot. I think that there was enough in this to indicate that it was fictional if you really dug into it, and if you were a friend of Jack's, except for the Twitter followers, who knows? But and I thought about that too, with like the post at the end and the link to the so and so dying, jumping off the cliff. We tried to build stuff in that, if you could tell it was fake, but there's always going to be somebody who doesn't, I suppose. We didn't have a specific plan in case, other than secretly we would probably pop champagne, yeah.
And I think that, there is I've seen it rear its head a few times, an ethical discussion of this type of experience, this type of game, and what is the responsibility of labeling or giving a opt-in where it's clearly fictional. And I don't know necessarily where I fall. I think it depends on the project, and I did get a little bit of heat for this during Stop Plus Ultra from people who maybe weren't as familiar with this type of storytelling. And I think you've got to make the call based on the project, and certainly you want to be responsible. You don't want to purposefully mislead people to get them in trouble, but at a certain point you can't really you can't worry about sending people out of the house like, oh, what if they fall down in a ditch on the way to pick up your dead drop? It's like you could fall down in a ditch on your way to the post office. It doesn't really, I don't personally feel that that's implicit on the game design. But yeah, you don't want to be irresponsible, and I think Steve always covers his bases on these things, and good design will hopefully mitigate any confusion over that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately you don't want people to think that it's real.
Right.
Because that's not fun. It's
and you can't really take credit for it if people think it's real.
No, it's true. Lucas had a comment, looks like on our earlier comment, it says about Jack changing his tone. He says, that's why I first asked them both about the first wedding they photographed, because Jack didn't sound like Jack anymore. So yeah, so they did notice.
Yep.
Nice. Well done. Well done.
Yeah, Dean O'Donnell, not really a question. I assigned this to my grad course, Design Interactive Experiences, and if you like, the students all had to write a post-mortem about it. Oh, that would be awesome.
Oh, yes.
That would be amazing.
Oh, wow.
Dean, you king of men.
Send it to us, darkdetour@gmail.com. That would be amazing.
Oh my gosh, cool.
That would be
We
amazing.
can get we can get Dean maybe a little special treat.
You want a Toby jar?
I got one left. I got a
Also, any other feedback, dial, right? To email it to us if there's anything specific.
Oh yeah, anybody.
Yeah, anybody,
darkdetour@gmail.com. I
Yeah.
check that account like once every 2 months. So yeah, I'll get to it.
Once every two.
No, it comes so fast. Um, a few more questions left here. How did you build your audience? Were any of you in charge of snowballing the story on social media? I think social media is something we could have done even better. I would love to have a full-time social media person next time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's just a lot that we could have done, but we just didn't have the bandwidth to do ourselves. So, really, for what this was, it was a small team. There was a lot. We split up the work 4 ways this year, and we were still all overworked.
We need a production office next year. That's what we're going to have.
We need a production office, and
Sorry,
Yes.
I get really excited. I'm like,
Interns.
yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So yeah, we could have definitely done that better. We didn't have anybody in charge. Social media was basically me. The Dark Detour, the meta social media. You mean? Yeah. So
Yeah. It would be a
sometimes,
big help if we had someone helping.
yeah, sometimes it
edit
felt
it.
like it was really good and I was on top of it. But then, when you're in production, I was not on top of it. So it's just. Here's one from Pixie, not a question, but thank you for the subtle references to last year's game with Talbot's name. We had a lot of subtle references. We had a lot of references to last year's game. We had a lot of references to American Werewolf in London because that was a big it was a big influence. It was a big influence. Those are my
And
words.
it's a big misdirection too, because we began by, deciding we'd set it on the moors, and we wanted a lot of dog references, right? So we tried to bring them in. In terms of the mythology of Freya, she has these two kind of two cats, which we'd flipped to make them two dogs, right? So we had a lot of the dog references, and then the hitchhiker that he picked up with the dogs. We tried to really give that misdirection as well with the influence of dogs because it was on the moors.
And then people didn't. I think people didn't bite. I think we overdid it because people didn't think it was a werewolf.
You know what? Last year we did the Thelma and Louise picture, and when we were on the moors, we were gonna do the American Werewolf in London picture with the anorak jackets and the woolly hats and stuff, and it was just so beautiful. It didn't seem right to do it, so maybe we needed to give more of a clue.
Let's see. Here's one from Michael. Dean commented on David's Facebook wall suggesting maybe Freya needs our help more than our ire. You've commented on the pitfalls of choose your own adventures, but I can't help but wonder perhaps a final mini choice of saving her rather than condemning her. That could have been a final choice for sure. But again, I think they needed closure for her. I think they needed. That could have been, but I don't know. There's a lot of pacing that was involved there that could have been. I don't know. Allison, what do you think of that?
I don't know. I just think that we had mapped that Freya would be saved, and I personally didn't want for her to be saved. It was a tragic story, and it was a love story, and it was set in the horror genre, but it was a love story, and for me, kind of creating it from the ground up, there were parallels to Romeo and Juliet, as there was for all of the couples that died in the love tree kind of curse every 99 years, and ultimately it led to both of their deaths. So it was a love story ultimately, and I wanted for it to be that she ended up in a way that couldn't be saved. So
the betrayal of legend was real.
Exactly.
And I think that in a storytelling sense, Michael's presenting this dichotomy between saving her life and condemning her, which to me, even though she was going to die and that was the story, whether or not she deserved the players' ire and whether she should have been condemned by the players or commended by the players and defended, that's still something that's entirely up to the interaction of the player. And,
Yeah.
those who want to put forth comments that recontextualize her character, they were free to do that. And I don't think that was dependent on whether or not the story ended with her dying.
Yeah.
A couple questions left here. We'll hit them fast. So what will happen to all the real requests people will make for their marriage photos to Sillinger Photography? Must know for science, of course. Jenny, what are you going to do with all those?
Sorry, Angelique. Jack won't be shooting your wedding. I think you figured it out by now.
Angelique has a new sideline as a wedding photographer.
I mean, I did think about potentially having David respond to the people that did get to him, because basically David's email address was not public knowledge. It was only for people who actually followed up with Jack, and then Jack would say, okay, well, now I'm going to pass you on to David, because David actually does the actual booking and logistics. So that was kind of a fun thing for if people dug that deep with Jack, he would hand them off to David. But ultimately, I felt that David's thank you video at the end was that was his closure. And to have him draw out continued conversations with other people is just not something I felt his character would do.
And it would kind of dilute the ending a little bit.
Yeah, and now David, after thanking the characters, which almost David served as us thanking everyone in a way, and I felt that was where it should stop, and to continue having conversations was just not appropriate.
Yeah. I think that about does it, guys. There's no more any last minute questions before we go? We're through the queue.
Now's your chance.
All right. Well, thanks. I mean, for us, we just got to say thanks. I mean, obviously, this thing doesn't come alive without you guys, and those of you that supported us on Indiegogo or not. It was great. We had a lot of fun. I have pretty much recovered on my sleep. I would go to bed at midnight and wake up at 1 and wake up at 5. So I was getting a little cranky by the end. But it was a labor of love. We had a lot of fun doing it, and we hope you enjoyed it too. So, anything else to add, guys? This great team. Thanks to the great team here.
Just that, really. Love working with you guys.
It was so much.
So send us your critiques. Send us your question. We love send us what you thought. We'd love to hear that feedback. Feedback welcome, so we can make next year even better. Did I say next year? Are we doing this next year?
You even going to ask that question? Really?
I think we are. I think we're on.
Alison and I were already talking about locations, so.
Oh, we've got it worked out, right? Here we go. There's one more question. There you go. One from Hugo.
Hugo, season 1 was USA. Season 2 was in the UK. Season 3 somewhere in Asia. I don't. Who knows? You never know.
How much people pledge to the Indiegogo.
Yes. We'll look at that pie chart and see where we'll look at the data and base it on our data, just like Netflix does. So who knows?
No, if we can afford to fly everyone over there, why not?
We need a big sponsor.
All right, guys, that's all we got time for. Thank you so much again, and thanks, guys, for joining us. And join up. Make sure you're on the mailing list at Dark Detour so you hear about next year. So that's it.
Thanks.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thanks.